Welcome to the Donald Trump paint marker video. We're starting here fast and furious. You'll see me with the click pen as always. The first, I'm just starting with blocking off the drawing, so you'll see some of this stuff coming up. I think the drawing is going to be really fun, and ultimately, it's kind of cool. It's going to get painted over anyway. So I got these really cool paint markers. Obviously, everybody's watching YouTube shorts whenever I saw this cool thing about traditional markers versus paint markers, and I had to get some. I had to get some so much that they then became the cool thing in the house, and I had to buy even more just so I had some more to play with, because I didn't get to this as soon as I wanted to. Anyway, I had a brief trip out to the DC tri-state or I don't know what the hell, the triangle area, the government triangle, if you will. Um, so I'm sitting in a hotel room right now, just waiting for my next day to get going, and I was like, let's do a drawing with some of this really cool watercolor paper and some of these new paint markers that I had. So I guess the real question you may be thinking is like, what are paint markers? You may be thinking about like graffiti markers, and I'm sure you could use some of it for graffiti. It's an acrylic paint marker, and they're really kind of like the size of a Sharpie, if you can think about that. They're probably like more of a traditional pen than it was like a really nice plastic. You'll see me, with them in just like probably a few minutes here. But probably asking, why are you using those? It's not the super big ones that you might think of if you're walking down the street and see a bunch of graffiti on, some of the lampposts or whatever. I did buy some of those just to see, because you'll see them in future drawings where I can just put down really big like streaks of color. You may have seen this in some of the other videos where I have some markers that do that, and they're just off of Amazon, nothing special, but really super broad tip, probably like an inch or more broad tip marker, so you can lay down some really big chunks of color, and then you can go back on top of it. So some of the other ones that were on the site, they're on this channel. There's other drawings that I did. Some of them are of Trump. Last time I was in DC, I was inspired. I was just kind of knocking out some portraits in the hotel room, and they were really cool. I thought, let's do a few of them in the same vein, the same kind of inspiration portrait. They all kind of turn out different because they're hand done. The proportions vary slightly, and you get some differentiation between each one. But ultimately, I was able to write like a 4-7 in yellow, and it was kind of nice, yellow and blue. There's not a lot of variation in some of the big broad tip markers, so yellow and blue, kind of standard colors. The paint markers, they come in all kinds of different colors. The one that I brought with me was an 18 color pack, and you'll see not a lot of skin tones, not a lot of different versions of brown. There's a few different versions of yellow, and there's like an orange that was really bright, kind of orange, kind of hard orange. And then, there's some other greens and stuff that didn't apply, but there's a nice white. And there's a gray. You'll see the gray come in. It's really interesting because it's a little darker gray than I would have liked, but it does something interesting. It kind of like played as a brown, which, yeah, you're going to see it. You're going to hopefully understand what I'm saying. How gray can become brown is really weird. But in this case, you see like the TV was on my left side, so it's just lit up with all the little TV stuff. Here's the foot of the I had a tripod with holding my phone overhead, so that's how you get the shot that we got right now. I'm just trying to keep it raw. Let's get drawing, and this took a lot longer than I thought it would. The drawing stage, I made a time-lapse video much faster. You can go watch that if this is boring for you, but And I think I shortened up the drawing phase even more in the time lapse. But it's nice because one, you get a little bit more familiar with the subject and the composition and the shapes that are there. So it's not like you're kind of going off from scratch when you're playing with paint markers, because the paint comes out really fast, and it's opaque. It covers. It's quick. So much quicker than I thought. I wanted a subject that I knew. I've drawn Trump's portrait a bunch of times. You can check it out on politicalportraits.com. You can go buy some of these. This one's for sale. So I've drawn his face, and I actually thought this was a really interesting portrait because his eyes were closed. He looked like he was, in contemplation about something. I've taken some of the fun Easter stuff and put that on top of it. So you'll see, in the end, probably the thumbnail, you'll see some of the Easter bits. But yeah, the colors came out. They were really pastel-y. At least the ones that I chose. It was very much like pinks, light pinks, yellows for his skin and his hair. And then I actually didn't go dark black on any of this stuff. It was really, there's a black. It definitely did come with that, but something about drawing with black, it could be a Sharpie, it could be something else, so I didn't bother. I was really trying to keep it pretty colorful. So yeah, that's coming up. I guess to focus in this last half, I think it's like halfway done. This is real time, so you're seeing how slow this drawing is going. But we've fleshed out a lot of the different pieces. Some of it's like thinking about the shapes, that this is, some of these color blocks into shapes. And, just thinking about not all the detail. I'm going to cover a lot of this pencil up. So it's thinking about the movement, shapes, blocking out different areas, and thinking, that's why you kind of see some like circles or some other shapes around his lips or the jowls or his nose. It's just really helpful to have these shapes to go off of. And I don't know if I knew exactly what was going to happen, but as I was thinking through this and drawing it, I was actually really happy with the drawing when it was done. It's like, damn, should I actually just go forward and continue to draw and to flesh this out with graphite? And, I can smear a bunch of things in there, get some eraser marks in. I can really do a bunch, but then I was like, you know what, let's get going. I'm here to draw with these paint markers, and you see, just like barely touching it, the paint is flowing. I didn't have to prime these. I didn't have to do anything with these paint markers. They're just ready to go. And the good part is they didn't like pick up the pencil and smear the pencil too much, because they were really ready to flow with all this this paint. I keep wanting to think about it as ink, but it is very different, and maybe I'll touch on that right now as we're getting going. And you see, like, it just obliterates those lines. And so very quickly into this, I'm past all the shapes. I've kind of painted over the top of the shapes. So now I'm hoping that these colors can become landmarks for me for future colors. And I didn't want to put down too much because I wasn't exactly sure how well these paint markers were going to cover themselves. So I didn't want to just color the whole thing yellow and then come back in and try and cover up stuff, because I didn't know if it was actually going to work that way. Turns out these do work pretty well on covering up some of the other pigment and paint that's on the drawing, or the painting, I guess. I guess I can call it a painting. I never think of myself as a painter. Only the fact that this medium is acrylic paint, should it even be considered a painting. I would really think of this probably more as a drawing with a paint, with a paint pigment. Anyway, the big core difference, if you're still like, what is the big difference? The easiest way to say it is that when you're thinking about a traditional marker or color pencil or crayon or something like that, generally you can see the marks that you made. And especially when you're doing just like what I was doing there, putting a lot of marks together, you'll see those marks. markers, the way that like the ink flows out and it absorbs into the paper, it kind of overlaps itself. It's transparent in its mark, and then the more you layer it, the heavier the mark gets, and the darker it gets. That's not what this stuff does. You could go back on top of it, and it's just going to continue to be the same thing. There is no blending. It doesn't need to be blended. And you can do that with some of the other markers. There's blending markers that you can use to kind of smear and push around some of the pigment so that it doesn't show lines in when you set it down and you're starting to draw with it. So these paint markers do a really good job of laying down pigment, and they put a lot on the page. It's not a pressure thing at all. You could push down a little bit, push down a lot, it's all coming out. So I think even though it looks like there's a brush tip on here, like you could get really fine lines, it's not as fine as you think. And ultimately the marks they're kind of that size. They're the width of the paintbrush. I start to try and go even lighter with other colors. This is that orange. The orange it's really bright orange. It's not a complementary orange to this yellow. It looks like a blaze orange. It's a little obnoxious. So right now I don't put too much down. You're gonna probably think to yourself, like, why did he even start? Like, I think that was it. And I was like, oh man, I gotta put a little bit more in because I may not even use it anymore. It felt like it was a little off. There must have been some orange that was reflecting up from his tie or from some paper he was holding that just kind of put a little bit of orange color in his skin at the bottom in a shadow. So it must have been bouncing off of an orange paper or something. And so I wasn't going to just add more throughout the whole thing. I just want to do a little bit so that even if I never touched it again, it looked okay. This was the pink, the redder of the pinks. And I probably could have laid more of this down and then went on top of it. But once again, I was looking for some of those more rosy tones. He's probably very tanned. He looks like he spent some time outside. So like he's always got that tanned look to him. So I didn't want to put too much pink, across the whole drawing because it's not really, representative. I think he's got more of a golden brown undertone than it's pink and reddish. Just kind of, he's got that, maybe even a little bit of bronzer or, bronze style foundation. So the pinks were definitely good for some of the flesh areas, or the fleshier areas. So maybe a little cheeks, the forehead, the nose, lips. So yeah, you can see I don't know, this was a labor of love. At a certain point I was wondering, like, is this actually, did I just make a big mistake buying these paint markers? And I actually thought I had a great drawing. So another thing that was jumping in the back of my head was, did I just mess up a really interesting drawing in the sake of doing these paints? And it's probably right around this time where I was questioning things quite a bit. Like, is this even what I wanted? Am I going to get the effects that I wanted? You could see that the paint did go over the other darker yellow. This light pink went over that darker yellow pretty efficiently and covered that up. If you get close enough, you may see it, or a little color gradation or something there because the other paint was there. And it probably wasn't totally dry, although this is a watercolor paper, so it should dry pretty quickly. But yeah, it has really good coverage over some of the darker colors, which was super helpful. So now I have this really odd drawing. I think I reset the camera so you get a little bit different. And this is a brown. For sure, it's a brown. The odd part is the name of this color, you would never guess it. The name of this color is called raspberry purple. And maybe it does come off as a kind of raspberry, definitely not a purple. I would see it as like a raspberry brown, if anything. It is over, even when it came through, it came from like in a brown, kind of color gradient. It was off to the side. So it had this really cool rainbow packaging, but it was brown. And it may not come through with the lighting, it may not come through in the scan very well, but it was kind of set up to be a brown, which is one of the darker colors in the palette. I think this, and there was a purple that's a darker. Purple and black were the only things that are darker than this. So this is ultimately serving as one of the pretty harsh shadows in the piece. So yeah, I think typically if you're watching a Bob Ross or somebody else paint, you'd want to keep layering the light colors, and you start from the lightest and you layer up, because then you can override those light colors. It was getting a little muddy for me with the pink and the darker yellow, and I was losing some of my lines, and I was definitely worried about erasing all the lines and just having this mush of light color and being lost in the drawing. So I think that's why I opted for this darker color, just to come in here and set some of the foundational lines, because I didn't want to lose them all. And it was hard to understand how to put color down and how to build it up, because I really like the idea of layering it. So yeah, I think traditionally this is probably what someone would consider wrong. This is not how you do this traditionally. And I don't know, because I don't have a painting education. I never really, was in class, did not work with a painting instructor, so I don't know the fundamentals of painting at all. I'd rather spend more time, my time be spent on anatomy and drawing, and this is just going to play. So, yeah, and I would encourage, I don't think you have to be learned in every different medium before you get started. Sometimes just learning is doing. So get in there and start doing stuff, and maybe just lower the expectation on how awesome the output's going to be, and then you can still go have a good time. So with these markers, I think these markers are probably like $10 for 18 of them, so it's pretty cheap. They flow really nice. The colors are strong, and in the end, I'm very happy with the piece. It was fun to do it. I did another one right after this, and then the night kind of got away, and I had to pack it in because I had things to do the next day. But yeah, this was good. Like going in there and reestablishing some of those landmarks in the drawing. But I didn't have to go too much. I could really focus on the shadow or the line that I was going to use this particular color for. So it was helpful. I'm happy that at this point in the drawing I did stop and I added back in the shadow. It really helped understand kind of where to pull shadow and light. And yeah, sometimes it gets lost, especially if we're not coloring the whole thing. It's selectively just doing lines and just some mark making. So it became very important to reestablish these shadows. And yeah, I do wonder if this is, what do you guys think in the comments? Is this something that you would have chanced at this point, or should I have waited as I was kind of working on the drawing? And there's some points I think here I just got a little bit wider with it, opened it up, was playing with some of the mark making ability of the tip. There's a brush tip. It was very responsive, and that's why you see some stippling a little bit. It was a way to reduce how much was going to be on the piece, because it flowed really, really quickly. And traditionally, I probably would have liked to do some cross hatching or some other stuff there was two things that were working against me. One, I really just didn't have the color range. I had this dark brown-ish raspberry purple, and then I had a purple. And I didn't want to just throw black on at this point. And ultimately did not add black to it at all. So I think it came out really nice without heavy blacks on everything. Sometimes blacks can just be a really easy crutch. All of a sudden, we just go full auto. Here's the darkest point, black, boom, done. I'm happy I didn't do that because it forced me to use more color, forced me to think through some of those color decisions even more, and ultimately making, I think, a more interesting drawing. So now you can see that has a certain look to it. We're not exactly done with the face. There's still going to be more probably in the cheek, in the jowls, in the neck. There's going to be a lot more work that needs to be done down there. And then even the ears. I don't know how much I do in the hair, but it's going to be nice. Yeah, so there's this brown is just coming through. It is not, I don't know, it's this crazy purplish brown. I've never seen it, but yeah, here his hair's not brown. Like, we all know that. But, like, we got to get some darkness in there, and I'm probably going to override this later with some additional colors. We want to do, I don't think about this as a traditional painting because this is paint markers. But in the end, and I have the luxury of seeing the end of this, but, like, even right now, it probably looks like markers right now, but in the end, I think it gets a painterly quality. And I would say this is almost serving in some spaces as an underpainting. It's a little broad. The tip can get really wet or full very quickly. And we've talked about it before, seen it here. I'm trying to go light. If I'm really light, I can get a small line. I think you have to be light touch and move very quickly. Actually, it looks kind of like a devil horn on top. Not intentional, but there's this little there's a crest of hair that flips up, and there's a dark spot underneath of that. So, yeah, this is actually where it gets even more fun, because now we have this gray. And once again, you got to think of Trump as he's out in the Florida sun golfing. There's not a lot of pale, but, like, I didn't want to use black, so this gray came in. I think when I first touched down, you're like, wow, this can get dark. So it comes out light, but it dries pretty dark. It's very rich gray. It's almost silverish. I was hoping for more reflective silver, but it kind of got like a dull. It comes out reflective silver, and then it dries as a dull gray. And so I was like, well, maybe that's a better overlap for some of the color in his hair, because like any president in the United States, there is just this phenomenon, and I don't know, maybe I've experienced it in my work life too. Like, your hair just goes white. Before I started some of my last gigs, I had no white in my hair, and now all of a sudden I got white. So, like, just like what happens with the presidents, like, they start their terms with vibrant, rich hair. Even if it's crazy orange or blonde or whatever. But if you look at Trump now, Dollars to Donuts, in the future, he will have just white hair. And I think it's just the stress or it's something changes at a molecular level with all the shit that he has to know. And it is wild. So I do think gray and white is probably gonna be more white, but there's an underpainting. You can see here there's this pink coming in, and the pink it's not the orange, and it really kind of is a fleshy, vibrant pink, but I'm kind of using it as a shadowy pink or a shadow. So he has a shadow on his three um, kind of his furrow brow, his eyelids, and there's definitely tons of shadows down in his neck. And you'll probably see this in many different videos, especially on this one, where you're unsure exactly how something's going to come off, the colors, how it lays next to other colors. You're going to go to the kind of a safe zone. So these dark areas where you know that there's other darks there, you're going to start testing it out. You're going to try and see how it lays on top of these other colors next to them. Where is it appropriate? And you're going to see definitely the orange come back in big time. And that orange, now in relation to some of these new colors, is not going to seem as stark as it was the first time. So as we layer more, kind of this richer pink and start creating some of those darker layers, it's pink. It's not too dark, but there's a richness and there's a fullness to that color that it really registers more than sometimes that light pink did. And so now finding opportunities to fill it in areas and make some connections. And I think as we do this, knowing that I can overlap, like I'm really kind of painting over top of some of these other light pinks. And you probably go right over these silvers and some of that, even that dark, kind of raspberry brown. I think these markers are really nice because they just cover. There's a lot of pigment in them, and they're opaque, so they do cover over the other colors pretty well. I have noticed on some other drawings that there may be a little bleed through, but you probably can do a second coat, or you can see some stippling there, and that really helps put down quite a bit of pigment. And maybe it pools it up a little bit, and then it dries more. Dries with more coverage. So yeah, a lot of this is going around, just touching things in, seeing where it makes sense. Not always a huge plan when going into some of these drawings, and I may even pull that pink back out later. Wouldn't be shocked if the pink comes back. But trying to touch on other areas, going across the surface of the piece, figuring out where it makes sense. And it's honestly, if I look at this still right now, it looks a little bit clownish. The colors don't seem uber professional, but that's just part of the process. And if you're doing this, I encourage you to just keep playing, keep adding things in. The process really works when you layer. And there'll be other people that often wonder, like, so when do you know when it's done? And that is probably the hardest part about the artist's journey, is to understand when something is done. There's never this obvious, stopping point. I think it's the tuning fork that you develop over time, saying, I feel good. I feel like this has accomplished what it needs to, and no additional marks are going to help it get better, or it's not going to drive more clarity. It's not going to communicate any more fully or in any additional rich way. So I can be done now. But here, there's quite a bit of white paper left. There's a bunch of drawing lines in there. Plenty more to do. And this light yellow is nice because it helps balance it out a little bit. In some places, maybe around the chin and the upper lip, it feels a bit better because it's really kind of starting to fill in. But around that eye that it's currently on, it still feels like there's a lot more to do there. So, not really feeling the resolution. I do like the stippling though. It feels good. It feels very painter, maybe even graffiti-esque, where adding just these little extra touches, little blips, little dots of paint. Yeah, I don't know what Yeah, or maybe it's just a part of a graphic, more graphic style. That felt good, filling in that cheek, bringing that down and connecting that to the jaw. The cheek and the jaw feel a little bit more robust. And that's why I said, like, as soon as we're starting to fill in some of the white, and now we're playing with color and we're pushing and pulling things a little bit more, once some of these things fill in, it's starting to feel more complete, and I'm liking it a lot more. The question is, when is the right time to stop with this color? And when I look at the color pack, there's only 18 colors in this particular pack. I think they do sell them up to like 72, or much more robust colors that have a lot of different ranges in there. I think I have a 32 pack set of the same brand, which is awesome. And I think there's more. Let me see. I have it in front of me. Sorry. Some of these little plastic pieces. Yeah, there's more. There's 3 yellows. There's actually 2 oranges in the bigger set. Maybe 3 if you count this like floral thing. Many more pinks. There's a few different skin tones. A real brown, which is more of like a mocha brown. There's like 5 greens, 5 blues, a bunch of different purples. So the range is higher. In the pack that I had with me, I only had I think, was it 16, 18 pieces. So we had to deal with what we had. Oh, here's that orange coming out. You'll see the orange doesn't maybe look as crazy. I was happier with it. Yeah, because now it has that other darker pink to play with, so it doesn't feel out of place as much, because there was still a heavy, bright kind of mid-tone color. So now the orange feels like it can do more, and it has a place in some of these other areas where before yeah, you can tell it wasn't as comfortable, laying down a lot of it, because it just felt out of place with that yellow. But I think with the light yellow and that pink, it makes a lot more sense. So don't be afraid if that happens to you when you're using a color and you're thinking, man, that really doesn't make a lot of sense right now. I think I have the wrong colors. Just keep going, play with it. The benefit of using this over traditional markers is this can cover on top of itself multiple times. Note that I am on a better paper. So this is a watercolor paper. It can handle the moisture from like a paint marker or a watercolor. So the paper's not getting deformed. It can handle a lot of layers. Now, if you're trying to do this on regular paper, even markers on regular paper, 1 or 2 passes can get really muddy really fast. So I'm not sure what I was doing with the orange in the hair. His hair does have this orange in it. It does have this warmth. It's like white and like blonde. So we've got a lot of weird things going on up there with that gray and brown. But I do think it's definitely more warm than it is cold. Oh, we got weird colors. So right now I'm using like a phone to record this, and every time the color changes in the room based on a TV or something else, we're gonna get a different white balance. So yeah, this is pretty good. It was a low lighting scenario. It was kind of late at night when I recorded this. Imagine my surprise when this actually turned out. I was happy with it at the end. You never know when you start if it's going to be something you're interested in, and this is nice. I did learn a lesson. There's a few other drawings where the color palette, I think it was like a swamp thing. Well, you have to go find it. Maybe I can put it in here. There's like a swamp thing drawing where I had a very similar color palette, and then I added green, and I don't know why green came in, but it really got muddy. It turned into this crappy brown. Granted, it was regular markers, so it didn't kind of stay its true color. It blended into this color, and it mixed with this yellow this green, and it just became nasty. So this, probably keeping a very limited color palette and not introducing too many other colors into the face, was helpful. And this is maybe, when we look at the blue here, doing his suit, this is where you really see the colors and why paint markers are better. So it's pretty much the same color, and you don't see a lot of the strokes. I think you can see some strokes here because it's drying, and also how fast the paint and the pigment refill in the brush tip. So if anything, it's probably just the thickness of paint that you're seeing and how quickly I moved through that. But you don't see it. It's not the same as a ink based marker. And I'm going to grab some purple, which I really like the purple on top of the brown. Hopefully you do as well. Please, like, throw a comment in there. Let me know what you think of the layering of colors. But I think it was at this point, I could have picked the black, and I'm happy I didn't pick black. And the more I went with purple here, the more I thought, maybe I should really just avoid black altogether in this drawing. And let's just keep it really colorful and use other colors to create the darkness. And that's where this purple, I mean, it did something different than black. Black usually would just stay in the back and it would get dark. I think this purple vibrates in a way where it can act like a black, but it's also can pick up the light and then bring some energy even into the shadows. So if this was a regular marker, the purple would do nothing here. It would just make it, whatever it was, darker and probably get muddy. But because these are paint markers, the purple actually holds up as purple. And you'll see me throw the purple on the blue, and that's really an interesting point because you'll see the paint again and why the paint markers are so strong. Yeah, it couldn't just be flat blue. I had to do a little bit something more down here. So as I layer in the purple, other than the mark itself and the edge of the mark, on his left side collar over here, you're going to see much, kind of bigger strokes. And these purples just really blend together well. I think this is a perfect example of the paint marker and how it's different than the traditional marker. I'm going to go back and fill that in a little bit. Maybe it's less sketchy. But it dries as if it's one purple kind of movement, which is helpful. And then that was a nice cleanup. The silver just acted as a little bit of a cleanup, and then it transitioned to the white collar. And probably went back and it had a little bit more silver and other things. Yeah, it's getting good. There's a little bit more left to do. Definitely going to come back with a bunch of white highlights. Yeah, here we go. There may be a little bit more color, but the white highlights are going to help. It didn't put any white down. I actually was trying to wait for some stuff to dry a little bit. I didn't want to fill the white tip up or have it blend too much. So I wanted to let things dry so I could really get this opaque white to sit down on top of it. And it makes sense. There's highlights that are coming from above, the light's coming from above. So anything that is going to catch that light, like the top of his cheek. This is probably where it got a little interesting. I'm going to just highlight the darkness underneath his nostril by adding some white. Your lips poke out a little bit, so above the top of the lip is going to catch some light. The opposite of that shadow, punch that shadow a little bit more. There's always a little bit of texture in your lips, so the white and some of the stippling allowed that to show up. Yeah, this is where I really feel like it's getting painterly with some of these like dots and lines. This is where it gets a little bit more graphic for me and more fun. And, it goes from a portrait. Originally, when I saw the drawing, I was like, man, maybe I should just draw this. Because the proportions, everything's coming out really nice. And I'm happy at this point, going through all the layers and all the different things, that I stayed in it because I could have easily thought it was going nowhere and got rid of it. I love these eyebrows. Just some squiggle lines. That felt very graphic and fun. Then here, let's see if the underpainting. So I'm going over the top of this with white. It was a pretty dark gray. I'd say it was a 50% or 60% gray. And then we still have all these other black or browns up there. And there's a lot of highlights in the ear. It just goes through and adds so much more character and dimension to add white in there. And it's more of the feeling of the ear comes out when there's highlights. Hopefully there's some more highlights in the face. Yeah. His jowls, even though it's a lot of shadows down there, really saturated, there's still going to be a little bit of white down there that pops. It's not like that is just sitting in total shadow. And for every shadow, there's probably a highlight next to it that allows you to really feel the shadow part of it. The darkest parts probably have to have some light parts hanging on top of it. Wonder what I'm looking for next. I think there's still going to be some white highlights in the left side of his hair. It looks too unfinished. Is this a red? Or is this that brown back? So I gotta grab the brown again. Maybe the highlights just got too destructive. I would imagine that there's some back and forth. This is good. The paint markers really worked out well. They held up on top of each other. So whatever the last layer was really comes through. If you're doing this, playing with a new medium, it's really easy to want to try every marker or every color. I would suggest picking a certain palette. And if you want it to be more graphic like this, I think it wouldn't look so good if we didn't have the pink or the orange. And even with the skin tone largely being the yellow, we know he's not jaundiced like that, and it's not so yellow. But it's nice because it establishes a home base to be able to put color on, and then allows us to play with color just a little bit more than we normally would. So I would definitely recommend start with a color that's a little bit more fun, that's not trying to be exact. So that when you put down other colors, or if you want to play a little bit more, like the pink, we all know his face is in pink, in orange, and it's nothing this stark, but we have a little bit of that permission by starting with something a little off kilter like yellow. And so we can get that really punchy, bright yellow, and we can have these really graphic oranges and graphic pinks. And I think, yeah, I guess we left it there with the hair. See, this is a pretty big drawing. I think it's a 5x7, and the hole on this is a 4x6. So we're not gonna have the whole drawing, but you've seen the whole drawing, and now we're gonna selectively crop out our piece. That's where we get rid of some of the hair, find the shoulder that we like, and if that's good, we'll get it mounted in there. And here I'm using an archival tape. It is what any frame shop anybody's going to use. It's an archival adhesive tape. Should be able to be taken off if need be. But it's at a slight angle in here, so I use a bigger piece on one side and a slightly smaller piece on the other, so that we can keep it secured. And instead of doing like a bigger hinge, a traditional hinge that I did in some of the other videos, that my wife showed me a different way to do hinging. But in the end, I cut this in half so that I could have a smaller piece next to the edge of the mat. So we have a slightly bigger piece. I think I realize where the camera is and bring it in. Yep. Here we go. It's always a pain to get these things undone. Sometimes it takes me a ridiculous amount of time, and I'm checking every corner. Tape is amazing. Tape and backing, not as fun. Good job, you finally did it. Great. Here we go. Get that down. it's good because it's paint markers, not as worrisome as like a charcoal drawing or something like that. Don't have to worry about things moving too much or smearing. No doubt it is a bunch of pigment layered on top of each other. It's probably not fully dry yet. It's dry enough to do some stuff with it, but I wouldn't really want to be running my hand over the top of any of it. And then, so we have the piece. It's now nicely cropped inside of our mat. I'll throw it back in the bag so it stays relatively protected. And yeah, it's very, very much a tight fit. There's a little bit of movement. I'll throw in a card here. This is just ways to get a hold of me, contact the channel, and has a little bit of a thank you on there, where to find us. You know, please feel free to hand that to somebody else. You know, if you're framing it, you don't have to keep it around, but you know, share it with other people if they want to maybe get something fun for somebody they know. You can always reach out for custom portraits or things like that. I just think the political portraits are much more fun to do, to commentate on. And yeah, here is that final Trump paint marker portrait. So this is a scan of it. I do right after it's finished, before I throw it into the mount. It didn't clean up any of it. There's some debris or some artifacts in the left side there. And the scans never quite come out right. The colors are a little bit off. This is maybe a little bit more matte tropical than the final colors, but I do like how graphic and painterly it is. So thanks for jumping on, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.